bear evidence of illegal abortions in D.C. The bodies came from the abortion clinic owned by Cesare Sant'Angelo. If a court order is not obtained this week, a Department of Justice letter says the evidence is to be destroyed. Idaho is fighting any groups seeking exception to its ban against abortions. The latest group saw their suit claiming religious purposes to abortion dismissed with prejudice. That means plaintiffs may try again at a higher court, but not with any federal district court. This is Life News Radio. Late last year, BC provincial authorities took or expropriated land from a Vancouver Catholic hospital to connect it to an arranged dying center. Now a suicide lawsuit against Vancouver's St. Paul Catholic Hospital seeks to force Catholics into gender assignments, abortion, and assisted suicide, or out of the practice of medicine. As British MPs continue pushing unlimited abortion, a new poll there shows that position has the support of only 16% of Brits. Thomas More attorneys are seeking dismissal of a California state suit against abortion pill reversal. The suit amounts to a deep dive by attorneys into the practice of medicine, essentially denying remedial use of simple hormones, and only when a mother chooses to change her mind about abortion. Pro-life advocates are crying foul against alleged proponents of limited government in Alabama. Their abortion initiative would make an end to all parental involvement in teen abortions. And an NBC poll shows Donald Trump not only leading President Biden, but walking away with key demographics traditionally owned by Democrats. For pro-life headlines delivered to your email address daily, sign up at lifenews.com. This has been Life News Radio.
The Station of the Cross Catholic Media Network presents Saints and Seasons. On February 8th, we celebrate the feast of St. Josephine Bakita, Virgin. The girl who would become Josephine was born to a wealthy family in Darfur, now part of Sudan, around the year 1869. When she was still just a girl, she was abducted by Arab slave traders, who gave her the name Bakita, meaning fortunate, and forced her to convert to Islam. She was sold and resold several times, regularly beaten and cruelly tortured by her Muslim masters, until she was eventually bought by an Italian consul, who treated her with great kindness and brought her with him to Italy when he fled the Mahdist uprising. In Venice, Bakita encountered the Canossian sisters and converted to Catholicism. She insisted on remaining with the sisters, and the Italian courts ruled her slavery illegal. Now officially free, Bakita was baptized as Josephine Margaret and given confirmation and Holy Communion by the future Pope St. Pius X. She became a Canossian nun, and for 50 years carried out the order's charism of charity with great humility and devotion until her death in the year of our Lord 1947. Her last words were, "Our Lady, Our Lady." Also honored on this day are St. John of Matha, co-founder of the Trinitarian Order in the traditional calendar, St. Jerome Emiliani in the modern calendar, St. Cuthman, St. Stephen of Muret, founder of the now-defunct Order of Grandmont, and many other martyrs, confessors, and holy virgins. For more about the saints and seasons of the Catholic Church, visit thestationofthecross.com/saints and seasons.
Sometimes we might be put in very difficult circumstances. Sometimes the circumstances might seem to be very conducive to holiness, but that really is a secondary question, what the circumstances are. It really depends on what our attitude is and what we want to do, again, in those circumstances, whether we want to see God's providence in those circumstances. How easily we make that excuse that if we were in different circumstances, I would practice virtue. If maybe I wasn't surrounded by so many annoying people, then I would be a patient person, but there's just too many difficult people in my life that make it impossible for me. You know, if I didn't have so many distractions in prayer, then I would be a man of great prayer, but there's just too many of them in my mind. I can't. If the circumstances were different, if I lived in a different time, in a different place, if the people in my life were different, then I would be different. When we make these excuses, we become complacent. It's not the circumstances we're in, but what we do in them that determines whether we reach holiness or not.
That's Sermons for Everyday Living from 6 to 7 a.m. Eastern on the Station of the Cross.
This is Joe McLean, and you're listening to the Station of the Cross, proclaiming the fullness of the truth with clarity and charity.
Heard around the world on your Android and Apple mobile devices.
Go into the world and tell every man that you meet There is a man on the cross.
A Catholic Take. What you need to know right now. A bold synthesis of inspiration and information. Keeping you up to date on the news and issues from a courageous Catholic perspective.
A Catholic Take with Joe McLean starts now.
Praise be to Jesus Christ. Welcome back to A Catholic Take, a bold synthesis of information and inspiration. I'm your host, Joe McLean. It is great to be on with you. Hey, the fog of war, cutting through the fog of war, getting to the facts. Who do we believe? What don't we believe? There's lots of reporting going on about Ukraine, about Israel, about Iran and the Houthis and so much more, not to mention the border crisis. And we're going to cut through some of that today with Colonel Matt Dooley, retired Army colonel, back on the program to give us some perspective about, let's say, funding to Ukraine, the death counts, the supplies of ammunition and missiles and all the rest. We're going to get into that with Matt Dooley. Brent Haynes is back on the program today. We're going to be talking about the, it's like reality TV in Atlanta, Georgia. I mean, what is going down there with Miss Willis? It's getting fishy, and Brent Haynes is going to cut through some of that fog as well at 14 past the hour. So lots of those stories to catch up on. The Catholic bishops in India are asking you for prayers. They're trying to raise awareness because, Christians in India only account for about 2.3% of the population. Almost 80% are the Hindus. The rest are Muslims or whatever else. And the reality is, the oppression is on the rise there. So let's keep them in our prayers today. We're going to be linking to everything we talk about over in the show notes at thestationofthecross.com/ACT, which, by the way, producer Jake's mug is now there with his pipe, too. He's looking pretty dapper. Check the updates out now at thestationofthecross.com/ACT. Let's pray. Let's get started. In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost. Amen. Remember, O most gracious Virgin Mary, that never was it known that anyone who fled to thy protection, implored thy help, or sought thine intercession was left unaided. Inspired by this confidence, I fly unto thee, O Virgin of Virgins, my mother. To thee do I come, before thee I stand sinful and sorrowful. O Mother of the Word incarnate, despise not my petitions, but in thy mercy hear and answer me. Amen. In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost, and now your saint of the day.
Saint Josephine Bakita, pray for us. The girl who would become Josephine was born to a wealthy family in Darfur, now part of Sudan, around the year 1869. When she was still just a girl, she was abducted by Arab slave traders, who gave her the name Bakita, meaning fortunate, and forced her to convert to Islam. She was sold and resold several times, regularly beaten and cruelly tortured by her Muslim masters, until she was eventually bought by an Italian consul, who treated her with great kindness and brought her with him to Italy when he fled the Mahdist uprising. In Venice, Bakita encountered the Canossian sisters and converted to Catholicism. She insisted on remaining with the sisters, and the Italian courts ruled her slavery totally illegal. Now officially free, Bakita was baptized as Josephine Margaret and given confirmation and Holy Communion by the future Pope St. Pius X himself. She became a Canossian nun, and for 50 years she carried out the order's charism of charity with great humility and devotion, until her death in the year of our Lord 1947 after a long illness. Her last words were, "Our Lady, Our Lady." For more about this day and others in the Church's calendar, visit thestationofthecross.com/saints and seasons. Saint Josephine Bakita, pray for us.
And now your headline news. The Post-Millennial is reporting Nikki Haley loses Nevada primary to none of these candidates. Nikki Haley has come in second in the Nevada primary to the choice of, quote, none of these candidates, close quote. The projected outcome places the option of literally no candidate ahead of Nikki Haley. At the time of publication, Haley was 30 points down. Nevada holds both a GOP primary and a caucus, but the winner of the caucus, to be held on Thursday, is the one that will take the state's 26 delegates. Candidates were given the option to participate in either the primary or the caucus. Well, Donald Trump chose the caucus, and he will be going up against Ryan Binkley, a long shot from Dallas, I guess. Anyway, Daily Wire reports helicopter with 5 U.S. Marines found after going missing. Search for crew is ongoing. The search and rescue officials have located a U.S. military helicopter that went missing on Tuesday while carrying 5 Marines during a routine training exercise in Southern California. The Marines said the helicopter was found Wednesday morning by civil authorities in Pine Valley. A statement said, quote, the 3rd Marine Aircraft Wing is using ground and aviation assets to locate the aircrew. However, a weather report noted that the mountain area where the helicopter went missing can have severe snow conditions that make it difficult for rescue crews to get in there and to find them. We'll keep you updated. Fox News reports White House says ICE will reduce deportations and detention capacity if Republicans don't pass that border bill. Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre told reporters that because Republicans have not passed the bipartisan border security agreement with funding for Israel and Ukraine, the administration is left without any other choice and must pull back from the border. The announcement that ICE will reduce enforcement operations comes after U.S. Customs and Border Protection reported more than 3.2 million encounters with illegal immigrants at the border, the highest ever recorded. The border agreement was tied to funding for Israel and Ukraine in a $118 billion national security supplemental package. The immigration portion of the bill includes heightened asylum restrictions and gives the president the authority to suspend the bill on an emergency basis. Yikes. Being threatened. That's fun. Those are your headline news. Hey, the gospel today comes to us from Mark chapter 7, verses 24 through 30. Jesus went to the district of Tyre. He entered a house and wanted no one to know about it, but he could not escape notice. Soon a woman whose daughter had an unclean spirit heard about him. She came and fell at his feet. The woman was a Greek, a Syrophoenician by birth, and she begged him to drive the demon out of her daughter. He said to her, "Let the children be fed first, for it is not right to take the food of the children and throw it to the dogs." She replied to him and said, "Lord, even the dogs under the table eat the children's scraps." Then he said to her, "For saying this, you may go. The demon has gone out of your daughter." When the woman went home, she found the child lying in the bed and the demon gone. The gospel of the Lord. Praise to you, Lord Jesus Christ. I love that passage. Isn't it so good? Just so much faith there. Don't worry about it. You can go. It's good. Because you have this faith, it's all good. Just imagine that. Could you imagine putting yourself in that situation, being there, looking him in the eyes, begging him to save your daughter, and he's like, "Yeah, it's good. You can go." I mean, man, my mind is blown just thinking about it. Theophilus said, after the Lord had finished his teaching concerning food, seeing that the Jews were incredulous, he enters into the country of the Gentiles. For the Jews being unfaithful, salvation turns itself to the Gentiles. Wherefore it is said, and from thence he arose and went into the borders of Tyre and Sidon. It's kind of like the whole shaking the dust off your feet. Hey, I came to the children first, but you rejected it. So now it's time to go to the dogs. Theophilus would go on to say, or else his reason for coming in secret was that the Jews should not find occasion of blame against him, as if he passed over to the unclean Gentiles. Still keeping his options open, right? Because he has come to save all. He's not come to save some. He wants to save us all. And he's trying to give everybody the most, the biggest, the greatest opportunity possible, the most chances he can afford us in order for us to accept that message, to accept that call for salvation, to cooperate with God's grace. But sometimes, I say often, too often, our hard hearts, our stiff necks, we just refuse, don't we? We just reject him, even though he's gone above and beyond for us. The Venerable Bede would say, the time will come when even you who are Gentiles will obtain salvation. But it is right that first the Jews who deservedly are wont to be called by the name of children of God's ancient election should be refreshed with heavenly bread, and that so at length the food of life should be ministered to the Gentiles. That is why also you'll see two accounts in the Gospels for the multiplying of the loaves and fishes. One was to the Jews and the other was to the Gentiles. The advocate would go on to say, he calls the Gentiles dogs as being thought wicked by the Jews. And he means by bread the benefit which the Lord promised to the children, that is, to the Jews. The sense, therefore, is that it is not right for the Gentiles first to be partakers of the benefit promised principally to the Jews. The reason, therefore, why the Lord does not immediately hear but delays his grace is that he may also show that the faith of the woman was firm, and that we may learn not at once to grow weary in prayer, but to continue in earnest until we obtain it. Let that sink in for a second. The Lord often delays because he's testing you. He's testing me. Will we persevere in prayer? Will we continue after it? I mean, let's just think about it from this perspective. I know it's true for me, and I'm sure it's true for you. How many lost loved ones who aren't a part of the fold, who reject the Lord, have we begged God to save? On our knees, begging. I can't tell you how many times I've bent my knees in prayer, begging for my lost loved ones to come home and to salvation itself. I haven't seen that happen just yet. But maybe the Lord is waiting to see if I will give up, if I will pack it in, call it quits because I'm not getting what I want. Maybe, just maybe, I should be like this Syrophoenician woman and trust God. Trust God. Let's pray to trust God today. Hey, coming up after the break, Brent Haynes is on the show. We're going to be talking about what's going down in Atlanta. Smells a little fishy, don't you think? We'll be right back. Don't go anywhere.
Here at the Station of the Cross, we proudly bring the truths of the Catholic faith to countless listeners through radio and mobile devices, and we're grateful for the feedback we've received.
It just really connected me to my faith. I always considered myself 100% Catholic, but didn't really realize that I wasn't fully practicing my faith, so I learned so much through the Station on the Cross and began just getting deeper in my prayers and feeling just so much closer to God and so well versed in learning more about the Bible and more about what actually it means to be Catholic. So it became very, very important to me, and I listen to the radio station daily, and I absolutely love it. I make it a regular practice of donating every time they have their fundraising, and just love it and wouldn't want it to ever go away.
If you've been blessed by listening to the Station of the Cross, let us know. Call 1-877-888-6279, extension 112. Then share your testimonial with us.
This is Jesuit Father Robert McTagg, your daily host of the Catholic Current. Join me on Thursday at 5 p.m. Eastern to welcome back Dr. Catherine Bakita. The world says smart women don't want to have kids. Dr. Bakita has proof that the world is wrong. Don't miss out. Join us on the Catholic Current on Thursday at 5 p.m. Eastern, coming to you from the Station of the Cross and the iCatholic Radio mobile app.
Download the app to take our programming with you wherever you go. Hear what listeners are saying about the regularly updated iCatholic Radio app.
The programs on iCatholic Radio are uplifting, educational, and have served to deepen my faith as a Catholic. Thank you for this amazing station.
Download the free iCatholic Radio app in your Android or Apple store today. If you already have the app, please consider giving us a 5-star review or telling a friend about it.
Be to Jesus Christ. Welcome back to A Catholic Take, a bold synthesis of information and inspiration. I'm your host, Joe McLean. It is great to be on with you. Praise be to God. Coming up at 30 past the hour, retired Army Colonel Matt Dooley is back on the show. We're going to be cutting through the fog of war. Who do you believe about what's going down in Ukraine? Have nearly 1 million people died so far? What about supplies? I mean, there's talk of missiles taking years to get to people, and we've given ours away. Do we have enough to supply for our own needs? What about giving all that money instead of the border crisis over to, Israel and Ukraine? And what about Iraq and Iran and the Houthis? I mean, there's so much going down, not to mention China, that we wanted to get Colonel Dooley back onto the show to get his take on some of these stories. And he's coming up at 30 past the hour. Hey, real quick, good news. The skull of St. Jean de Brebeuf is going to be making its way from Canada down through the United States. We're going to link to an article. So in case you're interested and you live in the States and you would like to see that, that would be amazing, wouldn't it? So check that out. The stationofthecross.com/ACT is where you'll find the show notes. That's the stationofthecross.com/ACT. Brent Haynes is back on the show today, a Catholic attorney, freedom fighter, friend of the show. Good morning to you, Brent. Thanks for being on.
Hello, Joe. Hello, everyone.
Praise be to God. Hey, America's gone full-on reality TV now. I mean, all we want is cheap beer and a ringside seat at a big fight, and we just want to watch the fireworks. Really, that is the summation. And if you just look at the story out of Atlanta with this DA there, I mean, it's reality TV through and through. What's going on?
Joe, sadly, that is a very apt way to describe the situation. And what is even worse is not just that it looks like a bad reality TV show, but what is worse is that the public does not even stand for character and integrity in our office holders anymore. You know, our whole political and civil discourse has just degraded over the years. In Atlanta, Georgia, the elected district attorney in Fulton County, which is where Atlanta is prosecuting former President Donald Trump for election interference. You know, most people know that. But she did not rely on the professional prosecutors in her office. She hired private lawyers to act as special prosecutors. One of them is a man named Nathan Wade. She hired him in November of 2021 at the rate of $250 an hour, and since then, in a little more than say 2 years, she has paid him more than $650,000. That's more than $300,000 a year. Now, nobody is discussing this aspect of it, but people should consider that this itself is an ethical conflict, and here's why. Lawyers are supposed to represent their clients zealously. If you or one of your listeners hires a lawyer in a contract dispute or a personal matter or any kind of legal issue, that lawyer is supposed to represent you zealously. They're supposed to do everything they can within the rules of ethics and the law to win your case, but not prosecutors. Prosecutors are different. Prosecutors, they take not just an oath to be a lawyer, they also take a second oath, and that is to serve justice. That means a prosecutor does not fight to win every case no matter what. It means prosecutors are supposed to do what is right. So, for example, if the evidence turns out that a case and the prosecution of that case is not justified, the prosecutor is supposed to dismiss that case. If the evidence turns out to, for example, not be as strong as originally thought, and lower charges might be justified, but not the higher charges, the prosecutor is supposed to reduce those charges. They're not supposed to wait for the other side to notice and then try to make an issue of it. But, Joe, if you're appointed as a special prosecutor and you're making hundreds of thousands of dollars to prosecute someone, are you likely to dismiss that case if you come to the conclusion that the case is not justified?
Not likely,
all of that
no.
money? Yeah, will all of that money, more than the regular full-time prosecutors make, will all that money that you're being paid, is that going to affect your decision on whether or not you drop the case or whether you decide to keep riding the gravy train?
That's right.
Some jurisdictions have laws to prevent this type of situation. Texas, a few years ago, had this problem where some expensive private criminal defense lawyers, who are very good lawyers and very well known, were appointed as special prosecutors, or strictly speaking, prosecutors pro tem. They were hired to prosecute the Attorney General of Texas. And they didn't get paid the regular prosecutor rate. Like Nathan Wade, they tried to charge their normal, very high, approximately $400 an hour criminal defense rate. And so that is really sticking it to the taxpayers. And what happened was the Texas legislature just passed a law just to protect taxpayers that says that when a special prosecutor or a prosecutor pro tem is appointed in Texas, only a prosecutor from another county or the Attorney General's office can be appointed. So Texas found a way around this ethical dilemma just for the sake of protecting taxpayers. But that's just one problem in Atlanta, Georgia, with prosecution there. A second is, it turns out that Nathan Wade is not qualified to prosecute a high-level, complex, historic election related prosecution against the former president of the United States. According to all the news reports, he has no experience prosecuting high-level felonies. According to multiple news reports, his only experience is prosecuting some lower-level misdemeanor charges, running unsuccessfully for a judgeship 3 times, and serving as a municipal judge in a suburban area outside of Atlanta. And a municipal judge all over the United States generally hears what kinds of cases, Joe? Traffic ticket cases.
Wow.
That's who Fani Willis, the elected district attorney in Atlanta, Georgia, hired to lead an historic prosecution against the former president of the United States, alleging that he committed criminal acts because he challenged the results of a close election. So why would she hire him? And why would she pay him hundreds of thousands of dollars of taxpayer money, Joe, instead of relying upon the professional prosecutors in her office? Well, now it turns out that she is romantically involved with Nathan Wade. One of the defendants in the case found out because of a divorce proceeding that was going on between Nathan Wade and his now ex-wife, or soon-to-be ex-wife. It turns out that Fani Willis and Nathan Wade are romantically involved. Now, and she has admitted this. She finally came out and admitted it, but she said the relationship only started after she hired him. Now, Joe, if a prosecutor determines that a case should be dismissed or probably pled down to a lesser charge, which frequently happens in prosecutions, is that prosecutor more likely or less likely to do that if he's romantically involved with the elected DA who appointed him, who has staked her career on that prosecution? Aside from all the money the special prosecutor is making that could dissuade him from a fair decision in dropping or reducing the prosecution, is that a conflict of interest?
Yeah, you think? I mean, just a little, maybe.
And fourth, Fani Willis it now turns out, has benefited from the excess salary she's paid Nathan Wade. A defense filing and multiple news reports claim that Wade paid for some or all of the cost of luxurious vacations to Napa Valley, California, Miami, and the Caribbean. And guess who went on those vacations with him?
Oh, gee, I wonder. Oh, man, yeah. I wouldn't have guessed that. That was probably my second guess, I would guess. I mean, the first one was the guy out of D.C. trying to prosecute Donald Trump. But anyway, Fani Willis, probably a strong second contender in the who gets to enjoy taxpayer dollars in Atlanta the most. I mean, this is an insane story. Here's a question, though, before we're going to run out of time before you know it. Brent, is this case going to get dismissed now? I mean, this is a pretty convoluted, crazy story going down here. I think some are calling for Fani to recuse herself from this, to back off, to walk away from it. But she's not doing that, is she? I think she's a little worried that the case will get tossed out, and she's hoping to leverage this against Trump in the election in 2024. Isn't that the case?
That is exactly what is happening. The defense, at least some of the defendants, are asking her to be recused from the case, or even more so, for the case to be dismissed. Now, many legal experts and lawyers have commented that the case is unlikely to be dismissed because although these are ethical problems or apparent ethical problems, they don't affect the underlying merits of the case. So, for example, whatever the evidence is regarding Donald Trump and the other defendants having engaged in what they call criminalized election interference, they're saying, well, that doesn't have anything to do with whether or not the prosecutor and the elected DA are engaged in an immoral relationship or an unprofessional relationship that affects the appearance of fairness. What is likely, though, in my own judgment, is that her office will be recused, and that probably Wade will be recused. And that means basically they'll be taken off the case. The reports are that Willis is concerned about that for two reasons. One, that she won't be able to find other prosecutors who are willing to go forward with the case. And I think there's good reason for that. When you read the indictment, the indictment is highly suspicious because it talks about protected activities such as free speech. There might be evidence of criminal activity by Trump, but we haven't seen it yet. It's simply him, he and his associates, challenging the election results. It could be that she will that she will be recused, but they'll try to turn it over to other prosecutors in her office. Now, in many jurisdictions, if the elected district attorney is recused, everybody who works for them is accused. But they might try to go that route. But it's a serious challenge. And you mentioned the prosecution in Washington, D.C. That's another problem. When Wade, as an outside lawyer, gets paid, he has to turn in billing invoices. Guess what those billing invoices show? Trips to Washington, D.C. to meet with the White House counsel. Who is the White House counsel? A lawyer who works for the President of the United States. Who's the President of the United States? The political opponent of the man Nathan Wade is prosecuting. So why is the prosecutor from a local case in Atlanta, Georgia, going to Washington, D.C. to meet with the White House counsel? He also apparently met with the January 6th committee back when the Democrats were in charge of the House of Representatives, and they were running that committee. So was that a coordination of what looks like a political prosecution of the current leading major candidate for office from the opposing party that holds the White House and that controlled the January 6th committee? So, the Georgia prosecution is highly questionable anyway. The politicians routinely challenge the results in close elections. There might be evidence of clearly criminal activity, but so far we haven't seen it. But it would be best if this case were lost on the merits. But just to discourage the criminalization of common political activities, for the sake of, future politicians, future candidates, and the government of our country in the future. But Fani Willis's behavior in this case is just wrong. It is unprofessional. It is immoral. She should be disqualified, and the entire case should be dismissed. And
but will it, Brent? Will she be punished? Will this case be tossed out or no?
I suspect that the case will not be dismissed by the judge, but that she will be recused. That's my prediction.
Okay.
And that, that's not all, Joe. It turns out that the House Judiciary Committee is now investigating because the federal government and our federal tax dollars are everywhere. She got a $500,000 grant. A whistleblower tape recorded a meeting of her where she reported her concerns about the money being misused, and Willis then fired her and had her escorted from the building. So
Good times.
She was prosecuting the major political candidate for office in the United States from the opposing political party.
Wow, Brent Haynes, we're out of time. Boy, God, this world's crazy. Hey, let's become saints, because then everything will get better. We can't just have adulterers running the show anymore. Anyway, Brent Haynes, God bless you. God love you. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back. We're going to get with Colonel Matt Dooley and Through the Fog of War coming up right after this break. Share us with a friend.
Are you looking for a simple, creative, and easy way to give to the Station of the Cross? Consider a transfer of stock to help us continue evangelizing our world over the airwaves, through mobile devices, and through our website. If you are being called by God to donate through a transfer of stock from your brokerage account to ours, please ask your broker to contact us at 1-877-888-6279. Your broker will need to indicate the number of shares being transferred as well as the QSIP number of those shares. That's 1-877-888-6279. Thank you for considering a gift of stock to the Station of the Cross so that we can continue proclaiming the fullness of truth with clarity and charity.
The Station of the Cross Catholic Media Network is dedicated to answering the critical need of access to quality, consistent, professional, and proven Catholic programming. We cannot rely on other media outlets to properly represent our church. Catholic radio reaches Catholics, non-Catholic Christians, and non-believers alike. As a nonprofit lay organization financially independent of your diocese, our apostolate is listener-supported.
We hear all the time from listeners who discover the station by seeing a Try God bumper magnet in traffic. You can request a free bumper magnet and start evangelizing just by driving around town. Go to thestationofthecross.com and click on promotional material under the About tab. There you can request a magnet for your listening area. We even have one for the iCatholic Radio mobile app.
Request yours today.
Praise be to Jesus Christ. Welcome back to A Catholic Take, a bold synthesis of information and inspiration. I'm your host, Joe McLean, and here are your headline news. Just the News reports Netanyahu rejects Hamas ceasefire demands. Yesterday, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu rejected Hamas's ceasefire proposal, which included the release of 1,500 Palestinians, including 500 serving life sentences, in exchange for about 130 men, women, and children kidnapped by the terrorist group on October the 7th. Not all of the hostages are believed to be alive. Netanyahu expressed confidence that Israel's operation in Gaza will be over in months. Quote, "We are on the way to absolute victory," close quote, he said. Breitbart reports 2 terrorist bombings killed 28 in Pakistan on the day before a heated election. The deadly explosions followed a string of at least 9 bombings on Tuesday in which terrorists on motorcycles hurled grenades at polling stations. Pakistani officials have vowed to hold the elections on Thursday despite the wave of violence and accusations of suppression of the Islamic PTI party, whose leader, former Pakistani Prime Minister Imran Khan, was sentenced to 24 years in prison the week before the election. And the Daily Wire is reporting EU lawmakers call for travel ban on Tucker Carlson over Putin interview. Carlson posted a video to X on Tuesday announcing that he was in Moscow to interview Vladimir Putin. Carlson's sit-down with the Russian president is the first time Putin agreed to speak with a Western news person since Russia invaded Ukraine 2 years ago. European Parliament member Guy Verhofstadt, former Prime Minister of Belgium, said that the bloc should consider imposing a travel ban on Carlson for serving, quote, as his mouthpiece, close quote. Also, Urmas Payet, the member of the European Parliament from Estonia, backed the travel ban. Kremlin spokesperson Dmitry Peskov confirmed to Newsweek Wednesday that the interview had been recorded, adding, quote, Carlson's position is different from others. It is not pro-Russian. It is not pro-Ukrainian. It is pro-American. But at least it contrasts with the positions of traditional Anglo-Saxon media, close quote, Peskov said. And those are your headline news. Praise be to God. Good morning to retired Army Colonel Matt Dooley, helping us to cut through the fat and the fog of war. Colonel Dooley, welcome back. Thanks for being on today.
Hey, good morning. Thanks for having me.
The report, who do you believe? I try to look at lots of different sources to kind of get an understanding of what is and what is not going on out there. And lately, the reporting on so many various issues related to the Ukraine war in particular, like the Tucker Carlson thing, like that is, journalists can't interview people. Like, when did that start? I don't even know. But let's talk about the death count for starters. Depending on who you look at, the death count could be insanely high. Some are calling for more than 1 million casualties so far in this 2-year conflict between Russia and Ukraine. From your perspective, where do you think the actual casualties are?
Yeah, I think you've got to understand what you're talking about. Casualties include dead and wounded, those who've returned to battle, and those who are wounded so severely that they're out of the fight for good. When you look at the estimates for casualties, the sources you don't go to a Russian source and you don't go to a Ukrainian source, because they're in the business of portraying the best image for themselves and the worst image for their enemy. We've got to look for neutral sources. So there are Dutch sources, there are UK sources, there are US that give pretty good ballpark estimates, and talking to those who have an educated military perspective. My estimate, given all of that, is that the Russians have lost either dead or wounded, not returned to battle, somewhere in the neighborhood of 370 to 380,000. If you look at the ratios, depending on whether or not you're on the offense or defense, you may lose more on the attack, and you may lose less on the defense. The Ukrainians are able to kill or wound at a ratio of about 5 to 1. So you can back off the Russian numbers, and that's probably going to give you a better ballpark figure of the Ukrainian losses. That's still high. When you look at warfare in the latter half of the 20th century, the beginning of this century. We agonize over, rightly so, over the deaths of some 4,000 soldiers over the course of 10 years. But the Russians are able to lose that in about 2 weeks. So we're well past what they lost in the Soviet-Afghan war. And we're well past numbers that we've seen recently, going all the way back to 1945.
Okay, help me understand. Why would we... This is like thinking about the American Civil War. I mean, 600,000 dead. That's such a huge loss of life. Why would we tolerate... Why would any government tolerate that much loss of life? I mean, I guess you could argue Ukraine is fighting for its existence and Russia has, has everything to lose in that regard. But at some point, you'd think they'd come to the peace table and negotiate this thing to a ceasefire. But that hasn't happened. And in fact, we've seen Western governments pressure Ukraine to not negotiate that. So where do we stand on the ending of all of this?
Yeah, I hate to speculate to motivation, but I think it's real clear from the Ukrainian perspective, they're in an existential fight. They do not see themselves as Russian. They don't want to be swallowed and become part of a new Soviet Union or a new imperial Russia. And so they're going to fight until the bitter end because they see themselves as distinctly Ukrainian. I think most of us would understand that you would fight even if you were out there throwing rocks. So that you would not be subdued by an outside force. As far as Russian motivation, we look at the lens through a representative, Republican-style democracy, a little R representative democracy, where a population takes a vote, and then our parliament or our Congress or whatever representative government would then vote on behalf of how the body politic feels. Putin is a dictator. He rules Russia. And so they're going to do what one guy says. And so it's much easier for the Russians to fight because he says so. I think that from a motivation perspective, why would the West implore the Ukrainians to continue to fight, to continue to stand? We believe, either rightly or wrongly, that Russia's next step would be to expand the war to the rest of NATO, starting with the Baltic republics, that he had an intention of continuing to grow and reestablish what Russia used to be. And this is just the first step. So our concerns are, if Ukraine falls, what happens next? From my perspective, I believe that he does have an intention of expanding his sphere of influence. I don't think he would stop at Ukraine. Whether or not we manage this war in the right way is up for debate, and whether or not we communicated to Putin that he could get away with this and somehow led him in his calculus to try something he never should have done, I think is also up for debate. But either way, I don't think he intends to stop unless the Ukrainians stop him.
Okay, so I'm going to follow up on that because I sent you that video from Valuetainment to get your comments on that, and I'll be linking to it in the show notes, of course. But in that video, around the 7-minute, 19-second mark, Pat David talks about the increase of GDP budget to spending on defense issues. EU spending almost nothing, but Russia is up 300%. China is up 600%. Of course, America being a world power, we spend a lot of money on our self-defense. But there's a lot of questions here about supply chain. Do we have what we need in order to defend ourselves? We've given so much of it over to Ukraine. Now we're giving it to Israel. We still have ongoing issues with Iran in Iraq. We have the Houthis now that we're dealing with. And of course, China's talking about invading Taiwan. I mean, the founder of BlackRock has said he put his cards on the table, said he thinks he's going to see an invasion in Taiwan even as early as this year. So if Russia does intend to escalate things, and I think there's good reason to believe that's true, do they have what it takes to carry that out? With 300,000+ casualties that you mentioned earlier, nearly 400,000 casualties, do they have the manpower? Do they have the resources to carry out a larger campaign? Because if I'm looking at this Ukrainian situation, I would argue they couldn't even defeat Ukraine at this point. What gives them a chance to go against NATO in a broader sense?
Yeah, those are all great points. A wise old man once said, You go to war with the army that you have, not the army that you want. And Russia is discovering that yes, they did have some technically advanced tanks and some better aircraft and some better precision-guided munitions, but ultimately the bulk of what they had was what the old Soviet army bequeathed to them, and they've burned through that. You're going to shoot 10,000 artillery rounds a day. Eventually, you go through your ammo stockage. So you're absolutely right. If you're going to expand, if you're going to do more, you're not doing it next week. You've got to retool your industry to be able to keep up with demand, both in terms of replenishing ammo stockage and replacing your combat equipment as you have normal attritional losses on the front. And it's not as easy to produce a modern tank as it would have been a tank back in World War II. They're expensive. There are chipsets and electronics that have to go into these things. Same thing with aircraft. They're extremely expensive. This is not a P-51 or a Yak-3. This is an Su-35. There are things that, if you're going to create a stealth aircraft, fifth generation fighter, that are expensive, and it takes time to produce. So if you have designs to take over Western Europe, and your military is being ground down in Ukraine, you've got some real ratio questions about whether or not you can get away with it. I do firmly believe that if this is a silver lining, one of the outcomes of the Ukrainian stand against Russians is to give a moment of pause to Xi and the Chinese. That crossing that large moat to try to take Taiwan, which would be a motivated, well-equipped, technologically advanced military, would not be a walk in the park. And that, yes, you would lose millions doing it, even if you were successful. So, again, in modern warfare, men and machines are consumed at a horrific rate. We anticipated that during the Cold War, and thank God didn't fight a major global conflagration in Western Europe. But we're proving it, we're seeing it for real in Ukraine. And it would give everyone a moment of pause to ask themselves, do we think we could carry this out? And how long would it last before we completely ran out of both weapons and ammo?
So what about American supplies? Do we have enough after all that we've given away to defend ourselves if a conflict with Iran should kick off or the Houthis get more interesting or whatever? Can we defend ourselves?
That's a fair question. Like I said, we're burdened by the same challenges as any other major military power. Unfortunately or fortunately, there are not vast shelves of munitions that are put back. You can't go to a version of weapons Walmart and walk through and see shelves of precision-guided munitions all laying back, just waiting to be expended. That you try to anticipate with your logistics, being able to produce enough to replace what you use at a rate that's roughly equivalent so that you don't run out. But they are expensive, and we don't have massive stockage. Without getting into any classified data, the question about whether or not we can sustain a war in multiple different directions is something the Pentagon grapples with all the time. The original plan was to be able to wage 2 mid-intensity conflicts at the same time over the globe. Whether or not we can still do that or not is open for debate. Maybe it's 1.5. We've got to answer these questions prior to the engagement so that we can take the steps necessary to retool our industry and to get our feet set in order to be able to deal with this. The issues with supply chain that you bring up are acute when you talk about chipsets and electronics for precision-guided munitions. We need the software foundries here. We need the chip foundries here, not overseas.
Yeah, and setting up a chip factory probably doesn't happen overnight either. That probably takes some time to get done. So there's that issue. Hey, we're up against a break here. Retired Army Colonel Matt Dooley is our guest. We're talking about the Ukraine conflict and a lot of these issues that are on the agenda for 2024 that could get very ugly for us. On the other side of the break, I want to get your take on the Navy reducing their standards. Some are saying that if some of these conflicts, these global conflicts kick off and much more intensity, we could be looking at a draft. Is that true? Is this an indicator of war, or is there woke policies coming to bite them in the backside? All of that and more coming up with retired Army Colonel Matt Dooley next.
Here's the question for your non-Catholic friend. Does the word penance seem too Catholic and unnecessary? Are you fine with the reality of repentance, but not with the idea of penance? Well, here's your 3 best friendship tools for Catholic evangelism. Number 1, good parents. Your finest son throws a ball at his brother, who with precision ducks, thus breaking the window behind him. Of course, forgiveness is granted. You then punish him for disobeying the command to not horse around in the house, so here's the rub. You then tell your son to go break out his piggy bank and pay for the new window. Have you had to do that? If so, then guess what? You believe in penance, not just repentance. Secondly, food and beverage trends. We have Pepsi Light, we have Yogurt Light, we have Bud Light, but can we please stop with the Christianity Light? St. Cyprian in the 4th century wrote, quote, "This penance is characterized by the exercise of tears, lamentation, fasting, and abstinence." Yikes. And thirdly, my take. Remember, forgiveness is for the guilty, repentance is for the disciple, but penance is for the brave. Come on, non-Catholic pastor, teach your flock penance. Find me online at Smarty Pants Catholic Evangelism.
Coming up Thursday on The Simple Truth, live at 4 p.m. Eastern, it's Thursday Catechesis with co-host Father Jeff Fashing, where we strive to faithfully hand on Catholic doctrine in faith and morals for ongoing formation and ongoing conversion. Our topic today is angels, demons, fasting, and abstinence. A great topic with Lent right around the corner. On The Simple Truth, live at 4 p.m. Eastern.
What you're offering and giving to me, you deserve to get back because you're offering more than I can give.
I learned so much through the Stations on the Cross. I listen to the radio station daily, and I absolutely love it.
I was attending the chapel and places like that, and through your programs, I was able to find out how other Protestants had come back into the Catholic Church. God bless the Station of the Cross.
Donate today at thestationofthecross.com. Praise be to Jesus Christ. Welcome back to A Catholic Take, a bold synthesis of information and inspiration. I'm your host, Joe McClain. Praise be to God. Coming up at the top of the hour, we're going to say goodbye to the radio, stay on the live video feed for the after show, and get your take on all of this. It's a live, direct conversation, and you can hang out with us. If you just go to thestationofthecross.com/ACT, and you scroll down to the live video feed. By the way, we're doing a 54-day novena in collaboration with Dr. Anthony Stein over Return to Tradition. Links in the show notes, as well as on the page there at the stationofthecross.com/ACT. But you'll see where there's, YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, Rumble, all that stuff is there, linked up, thestationofthecross.com/ACT. We're talking with retired Army Colonel Matt Dooley about various subjects, Ukraine, Israel, all of these global conflicts and how they really affect us, and trying to cut through some of the media hype that goes on. I'm going to be honest, I'm not that smart of a guy. It's really hard to tell fact from fiction sometimes on these stories, and I depend on Colonel Dooley to help us with that. Colonel Dooley, welcome back to the show. Let me ask you, I saw the Navy drop its standards. Not even the Marine Corps is as low as the U.S. Navy is now. I mean, you got a pulse? Raise your right hand, repeat after me. You're in. I mean, it's kind of hilarious, actually. But at the same time, some have suggested that that's an indicator that the demand for personnel has now gone up because there's an anticipation of a global conflict. I don't know if that's true. I'd like to get your take on that. But what is the impact of reducing the Navy's requirements to gain entry into enlistment?
Well, yeah, first let me put some historical background behind this. We went to an all-volunteer military after Vietnam. We did have a draft. It's called conscription officially, where those who are 18 and above register for selective service, and then your draft number is called, and you report for duty, and they can stick you in the Army, the Navy, the Marine Corps, Air Force, wherever the needs of the military happen to be. But we went to an all-volunteer military, which means that, you have a sort of a marketing campaign. Everybody remembers the old Be All You Can Be from the 70s and 80s, and that's back again. The Army's gone back and used that. The Navy has the same problems in recruiting shortfall as anybody else. The only branch of service that doesn't have a recruiting issue is the Marines. They're able to fill their quota pretty much year after year. because they have a very good marketing campaign and everyone understands what they're about. So changing standards in order to be able to fill slots is a reflection of having to get creative because of the recruiting shortfalls. The Navy may have different reasons for the recruiting shortfalls than let's say the Army, but we've had to get creative. There are questions and studies the Pentagon has undergone to try to figure out why there are recruiting shortfalls. Everyone has an opinion. I have my opinion. But if we do suddenly find ourselves on a war footing where we have either an imminent conflict or there's a surprise attack and it's been thrown upon us, we would have to have a return to the draft in order to stand up the size of the military we would need to wage a global campaign. Thank God we're not there yet. We haven't been there since World War II. There is a definite difference between a small volunteer modern military that does very specific elite missions or very short-term missions and a global war where you've got to have immediately 20 million soldiers in uniform overnight. That's not what's motivating the change in standards for the Navy. They've just got to fill basic slots for a volunteer force.
A lot of veterans are saying, at least online, they're saying that they can't recommend the enlistments anymore because the military culture has changed so much and become very, very toxic. I mean, we all saw what happened with the mandates. Of course, many members were, kicked out because they didn't want to go along with those mandates. But then the social policies coming out of the Pentagon have had drastic impact on the American military mindset. And as I said, many veterans are saying, I can't recommend this to our children anymore. It just seems so crazy. What say you to that?
Yeah, you can't hear comments like that from veterans and those who are not recommending military service and not say that has an impact. There's sort of this willful blindness, I think, in my opinion, for those who are trying to solve the recruiting issue and not taking those opinions into account. That has a real impact. But we're also seeing, I think, perhaps the unintended consequence of a shift in focus for military recruiting that's targeted those populations, those minorities, those elements of our society that military service has not traditionally appealed to. When you target your resources and your efforts to get those constituencies to serve, and you ignore, the bulk of who you used to appeal to, you don't reach out to them, you don't message them, then you don't get their interest. When you add to that this concern for woke policies and whether or not the military has lost focus, that does have a real impact. People want to join a winning football team. People want to join a winning Formula One race team. People don't want to join an organization that has apparent problems that are easy to see on the surface. So even if you don't have an uncle or a father or a sister or mom is encouraging you to serve, if you're just thinking about it, coming out of high school and you're looking about what kind of winning teams do I want to join, right now we've got some issues pushing that winning image. The military, I think, in my opinion, really has that unique mandate, that unique imperative to patriotically stand for what the United States is all about. And when that message becomes muddled, the message becomes confused, when we're ripping at each other as a society, it's hard to compel a young man or woman to want to join an organization where the imperative is not clearly understood.
Yeah. Or as Catholics, worried about our giving over, our children to a cause that's, political or even, I would say, greed being involved in our motivations versus a noble cause. Laying down one's life in patriotic defense of the country is one thing, but giving your life over to some sort of political football that who gets to decide is, nobody's business, but, it just seems crazy to me. And I think a lot of parents are feeling that now. They don't want their children to have to go and die or fight in a cause that isn't noble, isn't moral. I mean, there's just so many things going on today. So let me ask you this question before we do run out of time. What do you think? So we put all these chips on the table today on the conversation. Ukraine, we've got Taiwan. We're looking at Houthis and Iran. We're looking at whatever China does with Taiwan, we said a second ago. And then who else? Oh, Israel. There's that. And then there's the border crisis. The vast majority of the border security bill was to go to Israel and Ukraine, not to the border. And it's the highest numbers on record ever. And people are talking, civil war, which is rhetoric that's dangerous. So how do you see the rest of this year playing out?
I think we need absolute clarity, both in terms of our foreign policy and our domestic policy, and that's what's missing. So, we're in a political year, and I'm not in the business of advising one political party or the other, but if it were me running for president, my absolute theme would be a reestablishment of American credibility. When the world understands where America is going and what we stand for and what we're willing to do and what we won't tolerate, things are more stable. And that's what's missing, in my opinion. We have an issue with sovereignty if we don't have borders. We are a nation of immigrants, but there has to be ordered immigration. For the same reason why we stand in line at a drinking fountain or at a soup kitchen. Anything else is chaos. We want to welcome people here, but there has to be order. We have to offer advice to our friends and clarity from where we stand. Otherwise, there's chaos.
Maybe it's time to get back to the basics on every level. Colonel Matt Dooley, God bless you. God love you. Thank you for your insight and in conversating about these difficult topics. I pray there's no escalation in 2024. Let's walk back from the edge of the abyss here. But nonetheless, thanks for giving us some insight. We're going to say goodbye to the radio audience. We're going to stay on the live video feed for what we call the after show. And your conversation, your insight, your take is on the agenda. Tomorrow, we're going to have a conversation about Dante's Inferno with a Catholic artist. It's going to be amazing. So stick around for that. We'll see you there. God bless you. God love you.
So what did you think of today's show? Let's discuss that right now in the after show. Your take on the after take. Comment, interact live with me and the team. All you need to do is search for one of our live video feeds on Facebook, YouTube, Rumble, Twitter, LinkedIn, and elsewhere. Simply search for the Station of the Cross, Joe McLean, or A Catholic Take. I'm looking forward to seeing you and interacting with you directly. It all starts right now. It's the after show.
And we are back. Welcome to the after show, everyone.
Hey, good morning, everybody. Can we just start over? I feel like I can do better. Can we just go take it from the top? Get everybody back on. Let's just start this whole thing. I think I could do better. I honestly do. Some days it's like that.
Right.
Some days you just kind of like live radio. It's like, this is why people pre-record. But then if we pre-recorded, then we would just, we would do 1,000 takes and we'd never be satisfied. We'd work 100 extra hours just trying to polish it all up, make it look perfect. You're right. You're right, Jake. It is what it is. Thanks for talking me off the ledge there.
What are you going to do?
That. Yeah.
What are you gonna
Mike
do?
K., good morning to you. Praise be to God. Good morning to you, Mike K. Nick the Mike is here. Glad to see you in the back end, brother. Mike, T-Storm, Kathleen, good morning to you. Damon, good morning to you. Trad Jack Burton, Tweed in tow. Good morning to you. Sharon, good morning to you. Kathleen posting a picture of Vladimir Putin's desk phone. It's hilarious. James, 16897 has joined the back end. Praise be to God. Glad you're here over the insiders, James. Thanks for doing that. Cindy K, good morning to you. Janice, good morning to you. Paul, our friend from Buffalo, good morning to you. Kathleen and Eileen, good morning to you. Yvonne, Mimi, good morning to you. Praise be to God. Glad you guys are here today. Thanks for commenting. I see Troy Lockett there as well. Glad to see it. Wonderful. Damon, good morning to you. Praise be to God. Good morning, everybody. Lori, Don Paddock, Patty, and Junior Barra, good morning. Honey West 25 is on the team today. Says, leaving soldiers to die in Afghanistan? No way, Jose. You know what I didn't get to ask? I wanted to ask, and I ran out of time. This is why I say we should start over, because I think I could do it better. Drafting your daughters. How did you feel about that? Are you on the team Israel that says, let the women serve and die right alongside their men? I'm definitely not on that team. Women could fight. Of course, they're capable of it, but they ought not to be doing it. Why not? Because they are a precious resource and commodity that need to be protected by men and preserved. It is our call to lead, protect, and to provide. That is not their call. They have other jobs. They got other duties. They got other things to focus on. That ain't them. It's our job to do those things, not theirs. That is what God commanded us to do in the garden, Genesis chapter 2, and we ought to be doing it. And you can't be losing your women. You can lose men. You can always have more men. You know, if you lose your women, your ability to sustain your people, it's over. So just on a practical scale, it's bad news. But boy, the push to call for women has been big, large, intense, even in times of peace. What will it be if things kick off into a third world war? It's going to be bad, very bad. They're not just going to be satisfied by taking your sons. They're going to want your daughters too. Let me know what you think about that in the chat. Sci-Fi Mike, Salve Regina, good morning to you. Praise be to God. Lone Star 187, good morning to you. Thanks for being on the team today. And I see James 16897 also on Rumble. If you're on Rumble right now and you never commented before, can I encourage you to comment? Even if it's to disagree with me, your disagreements are completely welcome here. So welcome to the team. If you're on Rumble or rather YouTube, and you've never commented before, can I encourage you to comment for the first time? I would love to know that you're on the team and that you're here. Your take is what's on the agenda right now. Alberto, good morning to you. Carl, Thomas, good morning to you. Carl, you're from Kansas, if I remember correctly, right? Or am I got that wrong? Somebody's from Kansas on this. Carl says, women were also test pilots during World War II for the newly built aircraft. Well, in some respects, that's probably because there was no men around. That's why they needed like the manufacturing jobs and such. So they sent all the men to war. So they needed to fill the gaps. So that's why they went to the women there. I see that as slightly different. Carl, what part of Kansas, by the way? I haven't been to Kansas now since I think 2012 was the last time I drove through Kansas. And I remember driving through Kansas. I was on my way to Nebraska for a friend of mine being ordained in the FSSP. Driving through Kansas, and I happened to catch a sign on the side of the road that was advertising free land. They're giving away free land in Kansas. And I was like, what? I took a mental note of it. And then maybe 6 months later, I remembered, oh, there was that sign. So I Googled it. And I think it was Marquette, Kansas. So I looked it up, and Marquette had done a program that they were giving away free land in Kansas. And I'm thinking, Kansas? Do you have any idea of the size of buck that comes out of Kansas? Monster bucks in Kansas. Corn-fed, like they got neck muscles so thick. I mean, it's like, and like the rat, oh, I mean, just massive. Bullwinkle ain't got nothing on the deer in Kansas. So I thought, this could be my chance. This could be my chance that even a knuckle-dragger 501c3 employee like me might have land in Kansas because I could get free land in Kansas now. So I looked it up about the program, and I'm like, oh, let's just go see this free land because it says right here on the website like where this land is. So I thought, let's get on Google Earth and let's drive through Marquette, Kansas, and find the beautiful free land, the vast acreage that they're offering you. So I'm driving through on Google Earth through Marquette, Kansas, and I picked up something very interesting. I noticed that there were no citizens of the modern metropolis of Kansas, of Marquette, Kansas. There was a museum. There was a Lutheran church. There was even a community pool. There was a school even. There were no citizens in any of these pictures. Google tries to avoid that for the most part, but you'd find them somewhere, sometime. But there was it was completely like desolate of people. And I thought, that's strange. And then all of a sudden, I turned a street and I saw a citizen of Marquette, Kansas. I'm like, oh, let's go get closer look at this citizen of Marquette. There's finally somebody to greet us on our tour of Marquette. And I turned the corner and I pan the camera over,
And standing on his porch is one of the finest citizens of Marquette, Kansas, standing there with both fingers extended, telling me that I am number one, giving me the birds, the double birds, double-fisted, double-bird welcome committee from Marquette, Kansas. I laughed so much. It was so hilarious. Turns out that they took the fairgrounds there and they divided it up into sublots, and you can have a tiny, tiny portion of it so long as you agree to build a house and have to live there for a year before you sell it. They ended that program because it wasn't very successful. No kidding. Well, maybe if the greeting committee would learn other sign language besides "you're number one," then maybe, just maybe. I mean, just think about that. That guy that morning, it was like 10 o'clock in the morning, man. And he's like, just getting out of bed, and he's like, golly gee whiz, what am I going to do today? I don't know. I live in Marquette, Kansas. Not sure what to do today. And then he sees out of the corner of his eye, the Google car. Is that the Google car? That's the Google car. This is my chance. This is my one chance, my 15 minutes. And so he runs out to the sidewalk in front of his house and he flips the birds. Like, that's the thing he does when the Google car is coming by. I just thought that is so hilarious. So that's my last chance, my last trip through Marquette, Kansas. Where are you from, Carl? Was that the mayor? He asks. Maybe. I don't know. Maybe that was the mayor. I don't know. Amy WC, good morning to you. Shaquille, good morning to you. Colleen, good morning to you. Alberto, female KC Royals fan from Nebraska. Good morning to you. Janice, glad you're on the team today, of course. Thanks for doing it. Deborah, good morning to you. Aitna Murphy, Eric, JMJ, good morning to you. You worked as a hunting guide in Montana? Eric, we got to hook up, my friend. You got to show me where all the cool spots are. Someday, one of these days, it's on my bucket list to do a proper elk hunt. I've never hunted elk ever. I definitely want to, and I need to do it before I have to have all my knees replaced, which, everybody has their knees replaced at some point in their life, so got to do that. But hopefully I'll get that done. It's just such an only the rich can afford to elk hunt. That's the problem. Colin, good morning to you. Colleen, good morning to you. Praise be to God. Master Baker 78 is on the team today. He says, I've got to rewatch Rambo and Dukes of Hazzard. That's a heck of a mix right there. Rambo and Dukes of Hazzard. True fun fact, what do they hold in common? The bow and arrow. My favorite implement for hunting. The Dukes of Hazzard and Rambo, to learn how to make exploding arrowheads. I'll at least have my recurve if they take my guns. Yay and amen. The other fun thing about shooting a bow is you can generally shoot it in your backyard. Your neighbors don't really care, as long as you're able to, set up a situation to keep your arrows in your yard, into your property, not allow them to go elsewhere, which is definitely possible to do. I have a backdrop set up and all of that in a target. Can't really shoot because my left arm is basically lame at the moment. Hopefully, I started PET yesterday, physical therapy yesterday, so hopefully get that situated. But nonetheless, it's a great opportunity because it costs a lot. Once you own the equipment and the arrows, I have broken a lot of arrows in my time. In fact, I probably have some broken ones lying around. But it's not like going to a range where you got to pay to go to the range and you got to pay for ammo every time. Bow and arrow, shoot to your heart's content, and it is a good time. I highly recommend it. Go trad though. Go full on trad if you can, and get like a self bow. That'd be amazing. Let's see here. Who else? Little Daisy's here. KSB. Edwin, good morning to you. Praise be to God. Right on, Joe. That's probably in as far as the females being conscripted into the army. You guys, what do you guys? Anybody agree? Anybody want women to serve in the military? Let me know. Let me know. The American Knight got in trouble for that. Colonel Ripley. If you ever look up the American Knight, Colonel Ripley, he was a strong advocate against women serving in the military. David John is on the team. Good morning to you, David. Thank you again for all your support and for being here. We really appreciate it. Yvonne and Chesty Marine, Semper Fi, brother. Did you catch Colonel Dooley say the only branch maintaining its quota is the Marine Corps? Semper Fi, because they're not putting out woke commercials. That's why. I mean, when I joined back in the late 80s, when I put my Sauron gaze upon the Marine Corps, the eye gaze, man, it was all those baller-based posters of Marines jumping out of armored vehicles, washing up on shore. You know what I mean? Like the fully camouflaged Marines, or like even those Navy SEALs. I got to tell you, if it wasn't for I was this close to like attempting the Navy SEAL thing. I just was like, I don't think I can do it. I think I'm going to get washed out. So that's what it was easier to go to Marine Corps. I'm just going to be honest about that. But nonetheless, it was that poster of the SEALs where like their nose sticking up out of the water and the barrel of their in those days, it was probably an M16A2. They didn't have the M4s yet, but the water level's like right there on their nose and they're just all camoed out. Oh, so baller, so based. Jilly G, good morning to you. That's I'm having flashbacks sitting in the Marine Corps recruiting office. Man, oh man. Don the Highlander, good morning to you. Chris Anderson, good morning to you. Thanks for hanging out with us today. Really appreciate you being here. Anthony, Frank Rangel, glad to see you guys here. Thanks for doing it. Appreciate it. T-Storm says, I don't have a problem with women serving in the military, but I don't think they need to be alone with an entire group of men, and I also don't feel comfortable with them in combat positions. Going on to say the Marine Corps has gone completely woke. My daughter was in a unit when there were at least two clingers? Oh, from MASH. I know what you meant by that. If you know what I mean. And those clingers were allowed to show up at the morning roll call in their dresses. That is what we call a non sequitur. That's a non-starter. Can't do it. Not gonna do it. 1,000 points of light. Wouldn't be prudent. Not gonna do it. Sorry, can't do it. This is why we say can't recommend this stuff to our children. I mean, I have a son who would desire more than anything, I think, to serve in the military. And I've had to tell him very, very, very forthrightly, I cannot in good conscience recommend it. And I won't support him in the cause. If after he leaves my home, he still wants to do that he'll be an adult, it's on him. But while he's under my care and under my watch, I cannot in good conscience recommend that. And it's sad because it is built into the heart of every man. It's part of our DNA. It is part of who God created us to be, is to protect, to serve. And that is why the military is an attractive option for most men. Because it is a part of who we are. We want to serve. We want to protect. We want to defend. We want to do these things. But in fact, the reality is altogether different than the romanticism of it, which is why marketing draws so many men in. They want to be a part of the few, the proud, the Marines. They want to be the guy who gets through when most can't. They want to have it incredibly hard and know that we earned the title. Now, I was not a good Marine. I was a terrible Marine. I did not serve my country with distinction and honor. I served my country with selfishness and lust and gluttony and the rest. But I did earn the title, and I was proud of earning the title because I knew that most people couldn't do that. I was able to get that done. And I in fact, graduated #1, but I was so self-consumed that, and I talk about this in my first documentary feature film. If you want to know more, I'm sorry, and you don't know about it, you can find my film, The Other Side of Fear, on my YouTube channel. I did post it last year there. It was previously posted elsewhere. But anyway, my long story short is earning the title speaks to the heart of a man. So there is something there. But the problem is it's gone so crazy that we can't in good conscience recommend it anymore, which means that there's going to be a lot of good men who won't serve. A country who it's almost like a self-perpetuating prophecy in some ways. It's only going to get worse and worse and worse because fewer and fewer good people want to stand in the gap and put their lives on the line. Do you see what I'm saying? We definitely are headed towards a train wreck. You don't have to be a prophet to come to that conclusion. You don't have to believe any of the prophecies to come to that conclusion. When Colonel Dooley was talking about how Russia has these grand intentions to sort of invade Europe, we've been talking about prophecies that say that exact same thing. I mean, but I guarantee Colonel Dooley doesn't base that comment on prophecy. He's basing it upon his long service to our country as a colonel, as a West Point graduate, as a well-informed person who lives and breathes the military-industrial complex, and as a solid Catholic. Did you know he's also he is also an heir to the French royalty? Hashtag true story. Colonel Dooley is in line.
Dooley is an ancient French royal name.
No, I'm being very serious about this. He and I have talked about
I believe you. I'm just making a joke about the fact that his current last name is Dooley.
He is actually a tangential heir with an H to the French monarchy.
Pretty cool.
I'm just not making any conclusions about prophesied monarchs who have military experience and take over an army.
Xavier did say the great monarch was watching our show. So
he did. I'm not connecting those dots in any way, shape, or form.
We're just putting the dots out there.
Just
for
putting the dots on the table for others to see. That's all I'm doing. Jane, good morning to you. Thanks for hanging out with us today. Hey, Gus DMH is on the team today. TNG RR173, good morning to you. Praise be to God. Gus says, Army from 98 to 08. Thanks for your service, by the way. He says, I wouldn't recommend it. I would not recommend it either, especially with DEI and transgenderism. It has taken over. Yeah, bad times lie ahead. It is a precarious situation we find ourselves in. Henry of the Cross, says Troy Lockett. Shaquille, bye to you. Have a great day. Catherine says Henry V. Well, there you go, folks. Enjoy that one. We are definitely in trouble when crazy people are left to rule the roost. And I always go back to Apocalypse Now. Jake, you've seen Apocalypse Now, right?
While ago, but yeah.
Yeah. The great documentary film with Martin Sheen as tour guide. Remember when he gets to the bridge and it's dark, it's late, they dock up, there's a fire base right there underneath the bridge, and he's walking around, he's looking for the guy in charge. Comes across a gentleman, firing his M60 off into the dark. No one's returning fire. He's just letting rounds fly. Martin's like, who you shooting at? No response. Hey, who's in charge here? And the guy turns and says, ain't you? That was prophecy for our times, right there. That is in fact what's going down here today. How many people think we're going to see a world war kick off in 2024? Let me know. I certainly hope that is not going to happen. I do not want that to happen. But I believe there's enough powder kegs sitting on top of a fireplace right now to make it possible. So let me know what you think. Let me know. Janice says, love Canon Norman. We're talking about Ask a Priest Live now, are we? He is not afraid to call it what it is when asked about the ideologues. He is bold. He is a bold canon. We need more Canon Normans. Yea and amen. Round one says, I think it already has. Catherine says, sadly, yes. Angel Knight says, I hope no war. Amy says, I ain't busy. Got time. I got a good time for World War. Good time for World War III. Is it ever a good time for World War III? I'm not so sure. Sadly, yup, says Colleen, and the weight requirements as well. They can be fatter now too. Well, that means that they may draft me back into the game. Hope not. Man, I can't imagine doing what I did when I was 17. Like the son that I have who's interested in the military, you know, he loves to run. He's like, Dad, you want to come run with me? No. Like, no, I used to be a running fool. I used to be like Forrest Gump. I could be a running fool. But boy, it's been a long time. I do run on occasion, but not well. Let's just say not well. And I'm pretty sure trying to do pull-ups again is what led to my shoulder, my left shoulder going absolutely bad. So I'm trying to get that repaired now through physical therapy. Sean says, I think so. In fact, it's already World War III. I mean, so I caught the guy who founded BlackRock. He was a former Navy SEAL officer. He founded BlackRock. He's also a Catholic, by the way. And I saw him on like a comedian's podcast. And he said he believed that China would invade Taiwan in 2024. He believed that the signs seemed to indicate a major action at some point in the not so distant future. He talked about food supplies, personnel, and he supposed that the way that would get done would be with migration into Taiwan. 10,000 non-uniform, civilian-clothed, military-aged males in Taiwan who could react behind the scenes in a sabotage effort to pave the way for a landing force to be able to overcome any sort of defensive measures. It's a good thing that happens only in Taiwan. Could you imagine if, like, say, all across Europe or, say, in the United States? I mean, if it were me, boy, I would come across that southern border in, like, droves of military-aged males. Oh, man. Then you could act with behind the scenes, right? In a sabotage-like way, like, say, terrorist cell-like way to pave the way for a grander operation. Like, say, maybe using Cuba as a base, or you could launch like Scud missiles into the atmosphere and release dirty bombs, kind of like General Boynton suggested for year after year after year of trying to warn people. Yeah, but don't worry. Nothing is like that. It's totally conspiratorial. So don't worry about it. Yeah, Eric Prince, that's the name. Thank you for that, Mateus. Yeah, I mean, even though they've discovered that there are entire checkpoints along the trail that leads from South America through the Darien Gap all the way up through Mexico, there are certain checkpoints along that way. I mean, it's the World Health Organization, the WHO, and the WEF, and the Doctors Without Borders, and all of those folks, the Soros bunch. They're handing out maps and checkpoints and detailed information, phone numbers, where you can get supplies and help, whatever you need. This is how you get to America. Even though they're passing all that out, there are certain checkpoints along that route that are intended for only Chinese immigrants. Hotels with only Chinese immigrants in Mexico. There are checkpoints with immigration checkpoints, camps that are meant for only Chinese immigrants getting across the border. The Chinese, by the way, don't go through the Darien Gap. They would never bother with that. That's like dangerous. Like, who's going to do that? So they just take boats because they got money, because they're well funded, well supplied. They just skip the dangerous part, and then they right there. By the way, the sheriffs are now warning. They're coming back from a national. I posted a video about this last night in the Insider group. They're coming back from a national conference of sheriffs, and they were told that there is a high chance of terrorist activity now as a result to the immigrants coming across that border. Like, not even like, hey, generally speaking, this could potentially be. No, they're like, this is about to get ugly. I'm not a prophet. I'm not the son of a prophet. I'm not even in line to take over the French monarchy. But you don't have to be, I believe, to come to some conclusions. Bad things are about to go down. Are you ready? How should you be ready? Red Dawn, anyone? That's the trick. Can they really pull off a red? Do you guys think a Red Dawn is possible in places like America? It's definitely possible in Europe because they're far closer to the action, right? Like the logistical need to have an invasion force in Europe, continental Europe, is just a lot easier because you got Russia right there. China's not all that far away. Iran, not all that far away. Turkey, where will they stand at the end of the day? Not all that far away. But it's definitely a lot harder to maintain an extended campaign across an ocean. It takes a lot more resources and capability. And do they really have that? That video that I was linking to, that I was discussing sort of tangentially with Colonel Dooley, is from Valuetainment. Pat David here, Patrick Bet David, forgive me. One of the points he talks about in this video, which we linked up in the show notes for you at thestationacross.com/ACT, is how few resources the European countries actually have to defend themselves. They depend, like, let's say 75% upon America coming to their rescue. So when we think of NATO forces, you might as well just think America. It's about what America can do, because they are spending next to no money. And he talked about Germany in particular and how Germany might be able to sustain a 2-month campaign total. Like out of all of their resources, out of all of their money, they're the richest country in Europe right now. Out of all of their resources, all of their money, they might be able to do a 2-month sustained combat. That's it. By the way, according to his reportage, the UK is not far behind. The UK may not be able to sustain much more, according to this report. Is it true? I don't know. I have the slightest clue. I'm no expert in the subject, but it is very scary to think about how everything is going to depend upon America. So if you overwhelm the European continent with an invasion inside and from without, that takes them off the table, leaving America to stand alone. And if America is too busy caught up in foreign wars and giving away all of its supplies, and our economy is weakened, and our border security is weakened, what's the outcome of that? I don't know. Wolverines, says Kathleen. When asked the question to Eric Prince, but hold on, Eric, the founder of BlackRock, hold on, Eric. Come on, man. I got an AR-15. I got a whatever. Can I really stand up to F-16s, F-15s, tanks? Ask the Waco guy. Could the Waco guy stand up to a tank? Nope. Eric said, it's not about the dog in the fight. It's about the fight in the dog. Okay, true enough. Wolverines. Yeah.
I'm just wondering how effective our tanks were in a little place called Afghanistan.
At the end of the day, I think there is something to that, for sure. But, like, right now, you know, one of the biggest problems the Ukrainian forces are having is the thermal scopes mounted to those tanks in Russia. The thermal scopes mounted to helicopters and aircraft and drones. So they have thermal cloaks that the soldiers have to wear to prevent being, bombed or gunned down or whatever. Do you have a thermal cloak? I'm just asking for a friend. Do you have a thermal cloak to hide you in the darkness from a far, vast, superior technical force? Probably not. In America, we got thermal scopes mounted to our hog rifles because we hunt hogs at night. So you can buy thermal scopes at Walmart. You can get a thermal scope just about anywhere, but can you get a thermal cloak just about anywhere?
You just cover yourself in mud like Arnie.
That's right. I forgot about that. Done. What are we talking about? What are we even talking about? I don't even know. Honey West says, I need some mud. So we need mud pits. We're going to have mud pits in the backyard.
Trad mud pits.
Yikes. Trad mud pits. What's the answer then? Live in a state of grace. Be prepared to become a martyr for the faith if necessary, and be even more prepared to preach the gospel in season and out, from the highest mountaintop, from the rafters, and every place in between, because becoming a saint is the most important thing you can accomplish in life. You might have to defend your family someday, But you also might need to lead your family, just like in the book of Maccabees, to sainthood. Because martyrdom is a far more effective weapon than any weapon you're ever going to buy. You can never have enough ammo, but you can also never be a saint enough. So let's focus on priorities. We'll see you back here tomorrow. God love you.